Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the idea of a murder house, including the Watts family home in Frederick, Colorado. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. When a homicide or other terrible crimes take place at a private residence, like a single-family home, the way people view the house itself changes. In a way, it can become like a tourist attraction. People don't want to live there, but they want to see it. Sometimes rumors surface saying the house has become haunted, which creates a variety of reactions. Again, some people want to visit a haunted house. Others consider that ill-advised. The fate of a murder house itself is highly variable. Some are destroyed and turned into a park or something like that. Others are sold to people who live there just like a normal house. Some remain abandoned for many years. Others become something of an historic landmark. Let's take a look at a few examples of notorious murder houses. We see the so-called Amityville horror house in New York. This was the setting of 6 murders perpetrated by Ronald DeFeo Jr. in 1974. The house is still there. The address is 108 Ocean Drive instead of the original 112. People were visiting it, and I think changing the address was a strategy to try to dissuade that. There have been claims that this house is haunted. Clearly, it is not. The Boulder, Colorado house, where JonBenet Ramsey was murdered, sat on the market for 4 years. It's more like a mini mansion. A couple did buy the home in 2004, but then they moved and tried to sell it in 2008, 2009, 2011, and again in 2014. They were not successful. As I understand it, they just kept the house. John Wayne Gacy's house was located on Somerdale Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. He was a serial killer. 29 of his 33 victims were found buried on the property in late 1978 and early 1979. The house was destroyed and the lot stood vacant for many years, but eventually it was sold and somebody built another house on the lot, although the address was different. The 19-room Victorian mansion of John List burned to the ground about a year after he murdered his family. No one knows if the fire was intentional or accidental. Sharon Tate was staying at 10050 Celio Drive in Beverly Hills, California, when members of the so-called Manson family killed her and 4 others at that house. The house changed ownership 2 times after the murders. The second owner demolished it in 1994 and built a new house with a different address, 10066. That owner said that nothing was left of the original house. No dirt, no blade of grass, nothing remotely connected to Sharon Tate. So here we see a house that was destroyed in part out of respect for the victims, with an emphasis on one victim, Sharon Tate. The Bever family house in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, was the site of 5 homicides perpetrated by 2 brothers. The house mysteriously caught fire. Later, it was completely destroyed, and a park was built there. The Fall River, Massachusetts house, where Lizzie Borden's father and stepmother were murdered, was turned into a museum. The Maplecroft mansion, where Borden moved after she was acquitted of murder, is considered a highly desirable property as well. One of the more notorious homes is that of Chris Watts. This house is located at 2825 Saratoga Trail in Frederick, Colorado. This 4,200 square foot home was built in 2013 and purchased in May of that year for just under $400,000. Chris Watts still owed $349,000 at the time of the homicides. The house is now estimated to be worth somewhere around $600,000. The lender that owns the mortgage on the home foreclosed on it and put it up for auction, but no one bought it. The vacant house is becoming increasingly problematic for the neighbors. Apparently, many people visit the house, even people from out of state. So there's a lot of vehicular traffic in the neighborhood. In every case, in each of the murder houses I talked about here, we see this strong reaction, including fascination and disgust. I think people can tolerate a lot of events occurring in a house, including death from something like sickness or an accident, but not homicide. There's something about homicide that attaches to the property forever. A house where a murder took place will never be known for anything else. A cure for cancer could be found by a scientist working in that house, and it would still be thought of as a murder house. The reality is that even when houses are destroyed and a new house is built on the property, people still talk about that connection, but it reduces the number of people that would visit. Few people will travel to see a new house built on the same land. I think there's something unnerving about standing in a residence where something like that happened. There's the sense that it could have been anybody standing in that residence when the murders occurred. And that is true. Homicide can happen just about anywhere. When homicides occur, especially multiple homicides, everybody wants to try to figure out what happened. That's one of the reasons the Chris Watts case is so fascinating. In that search for answers, nothing can be ruled out. So if somebody was standing in a house like the Watts murder house, they might wonder if there's not something about that house that contributed to the crime. Was the house evil? Does the house drive people to commit murder? There is no scientific reason to believe that some houses want occupants to kill each other, although if homicides occurred in a particular house, this could introduce the idea to future residents. I don't think that's likely, but it's certainly a possibility. If one were to think about it, encouraging the residents to commit murder is a very bad decision for a house to make. There's a pretty good chance that the house will end up being destroyed as a result of that. So I guess if a house does that, it's kind of like a murder-suicide. A house demanding homicide would be like a car asking to have Ted Kennedy as its driver. It's much more likely that if the house could impose its will on one of the occupants, it would say something like, let's put down hardwood floors, get a fresh coat of paint, and how about fixing those cracks in the driveway? Another illogical thing is the idea that a house can be haunted after homicides. Almost like when people are murdered, they want to hang around in whatever location the crime happened. Does that mean that people killed on an interstate highway haunt that road? If somebody dies in a car, is the car haunted? What is it about a house that makes it more likely to be haunted than any other location? I think the bottom line is that the idea that some things are haunted is fascinating to people, and they find reasons to believe it's happening. Looking specifically at the Watts family home, what can be done in that situation? What should be done with the house? The Watts family home is in a neighborhood of other similar homes. As I understand it, the residents of that neighborhood want somebody to buy it and live there. They're ready to move on from the tragedy. I imagine they do not want it destroyed and being left as an empty lot. To some people, that seems like waste. To others, it makes perfect sense. Again, we see there's no standard reaction to a murder house. 50 to 100 years in the future, I think the house would sell without a problem, but I doubt the neighbors would be on board with a long-term plan like that. When the crime is still recent, there's probably more disgust and less fascination. As time goes on, of course, the level of fascination increases and disgust decreases. Many years from now, if that house is still standing, it'll probably be viewed more as an object of novelty as opposed to an object of horror. I think it's a little naive to believe that a family can just buy the house and move in and everything will be fine. Not because there's anything actually structurally wrong with the house, necessarily, but because of human behavior. People will still drive by and take pictures of the house, and the residents will know what happened there. It may take a toll on them. I think when people buy a house, even though nothing is forever, they want to believe that that house is part of their legacy, part of their family's legacy. Like if a family with the name Smith buys a home, they might call it the Smith family home, the Smith family residence. It becomes part of a tradition. It becomes linked to their identity. If somebody bought the Watts house, it'll never be part of their legacy. It'll always be known for the homicides. Another thing a buyer would have to consider as far as the Watts family home is that selling it would be difficult. People typically don't buy a house they're going to live in with the intent of selling it shortly afterward, but it's nice to have that option. Things can happen in life that necessitate a move. In this way, buying the Watts house is like living on a one-way dead-end street. I think owning a house like that would get old because the owner could never change the subject. Like if they were encountered somewhere and people were talking to them, the subject would always become what happened in that house. In a way, that reflects the experiences of certain controversial figures like Tonya Harding, O.J. Simpson, or Jeffrey Toobin. They probably want to talk about skating, football, and the law, respectively, but that is not where the conversation will end up. One solution I have to the problem of murder houses is to let disgraced celebrities live there. Put enough of them in one house, and maybe the house can be known for something else. Arguably, this would not always be significantly less frightening than homicide. In the example I used with Harding, Simpson, and Tubin, if somebody was visiting that home where they lived, say having dinner with them, that person may be worried about steel batons, knives, and let's just say other tools. What lesson can be learned from the dispositions of murder houses? There are many things to know when selling a home. Don't delay with foundation repairs, fix water leaks immediately, and don't commit homicide on the property. Among other problems like the murder part, there is the life in prison or the death penalty, as well as difficulty selling the house. Those are my thoughts on murder houses. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.